we're going to go to File, go to Export, Export As. Do you have a question? Okay. So again, you want to make sure it's in the right folder. It's in the right folder now, but if it wasn't, I would click on this little arrow to get my file dialog thing, and then go to the desktop, go to MMP 100. This is Self-Portrait 3. And then it gives me some different options. Let's do a PNG and a JPEG to compare the difference. So I'm going to do a PNG first. And it's going to give me some options. What resolution do I want? If I want like a really nice quality image, I can do 300 ppi. I can set up aliasing. You probably don't really want to think about aliasing with Illustrator unless you're doing like pixel art for some reason, but that's probably not what you're going to do. And then we can set the transparency. We don't want a transparent background for this, so let's just change it to white. I didn't realize my gradient has a lot of transparency in it, but we don't see that because the background is white. So I'll click OK. And now let's export the JPEG and then compare them. So I'm going to go back here, File, Export As. And this time I'm going to choose JPEG. And so remember, PNG is higher quality, but the file size is larger. JPEG does more compression, so the quality is going to go down, but the file size will be smaller. So for my JPEG options, I can actually choose the quality. It doesn't show me the file size here, so I'll have to look at it. But let's stick with 6. That's probably fine. And then we can also choose our screen resolution. So let's go to high screen resolution. When we're using vector art, it's better to use a higher resolution. And then I'm going to click OK. And so I'm going to go over to the Finder. And so we have the two self-portraits. So let's compare them and see if we can see any differences. So on the left is my JPEG, on the right is my PNG. So do you guys see any differences between those images? It's kind of hard to see on the projector, but if we zoom in a bit, you start to see this banding. So when you see those lines in your gradient, that's called banding. And I'll see it in the PNG as well, but it's not as pronounced. So you can see the quality is a little bit different, the number of colors is a little bit different, but overall they're pretty similar. You probably wouldn't notice if you were looking at this on your phone or on Instagram or something. But let's look at the file size. So the PNG is 600 kilobytes, that's not too bad. The JPEG is 450 kilobytes. So they're actually pretty close, and they're both really, really large images because we did that 300 resolution. This one is the JPEG, they're probably the same size. Yeah, both of them are over 3,700 pixels width and height, which is probably too much. We probably don't really want that. So we could export them again and change that if we want to. But that's pretty good. The other thing that we want to look at is just the difference. Now that we've exported this, so even if we're looking at the PNG, if I zoom in a lot on this PNG, eventually you're going to see pixels. Remember, we talked about the difference between rasterized images or bitmap images and vector images. So even though we made this using a pixel art or using a vector art program, when we export it, we're exporting it to a bitmap. So we're going to see those pixels if we zoom in far enough. In Illustrator, no matter how far you zoom in, it's never going to turn into pixels. It's always going to be a straight line. So that's kind of the difference between the vector art and the bitmap art. But even when we're designing in vector art, when we export it, it's going to become a bitmap format. Okay. So I can put this on Discord. So I'm just going to go over to Discord, go to MMP 100, and I'm going to put the JPEG because it's a little bit smaller. And I can say, here's my self-portrait. So for today, this is enough. Just put it on Discord so that we can take a look. Oh, I see that I have these edges, but I'm not going to worry about that too much. On Thursday, we will go over how to put it on OpenLab. All right, so I'm going to mention, so when I exported this the first time, you can see that it's cropped into where the frame starts, but that's not actually what I was going for. I forgot to add this. So what I need to do is go to File, Export, Export As. And then the thing that I forgot to add is the artboard. So if I don't use the artboards, it's going to crop into wherever my art is, like the actual shapes. So it cropped into the frame because that's the outside of my artwork. But if I want to see the whole thing, I need to say use artboards. And so now when I say export and say OK, now if I go back to the Finder, here's the new one. Now you can see it actually has the outside shape that I wanted. So the other thing I can do is if I don't want the frame, but I also don't want like the corners here, I can only do that with a PNG. A JPEG doesn't do transparency. So for that, I would have to go to Export, Export As. Now I can use artboards or not use artboards. It doesn't matter either one, but I'm gonna not use artboards. And I need to switch to PNG and click export. Let's not replace it, so let's say 2. And so now I want the background to be transparent, and you'll see that this is transparent in a couple of different places. So I'm gonna click OK, and then go back here, and here's my new one. So now you can see, it's hard to see in preview, but you can see there's no white background. I don't have those edges anymore. So if I want that rounded edge with the transparency, I don't want to use the white background. And we can actually see through a bit of the gradient, but we don't really see it here because we're using the preview window. I wonder if there's a way to show that. I don't know, actually. If I put it like in Photoshop or something, I would notice it, but I guess I don't really notice it here. So just a couple different parameters that you might want to use when you export. All right.